Will you
Wow,
guys
you're on
remind
top of
me?
that recording today.
What was that?
You're on top of recording today.
Oh, is it already recording?
Yeah, it's a
Leave anything in the chat or raise your hand if you want to talk. Go ahead.
so we are going to start by just talking about stress, and this is about how stress particularly affects your health and the health of different communities and populations. Next slide, please. To give you an overview of what we're going to talk about, first we're going to talk about stress and how it affects the body, and then how stress contributes to health disparities that have been researched and studied. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up by talking about what we can do to reduce stress. I know we all have daily stresses and things that we interact with and ways that it affects us. So we're going to talk about things that we can do over spring break to reduce our stress. Next slide, please. So starting out with the biology of stress, where stress affects the whole body. It's not just a one part of your body thing. And a stressful encounter, it can be physical or mental stress that you experience, and it can be good or it can be bad. The stress response, either way, it starts off in the hypothalamus, which initiates the stress response that your body has, and it puts you in fight or flight mode. Your adrenal glands are stimulated to release cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. And those hormones are what really fuel that fight or flight response, because those hormones will increase your heart rate, and that allows your muscles to work well, your blood flows faster, and it also creates a feeling of alertness in you. And that helps you deal with whatever the thing is that is stressing you. So whether that's a physical stress or a mental stress, you need to figure out how to do something, or you have some, physical threat to your well-being. Those hormones enable your body to function efficiently and quickly to be able to resolve that stress. And then once that stressful situation passes, the hypothalamus is signaled to stop the stress response, and then your hormone levels will return back to normal, and your body will go back into its normal rest and digest phase. Next slide, please. So stress can be really useful. Originally, stress was the body's way of responding to harmful situations. So when there was a tiger attacking or a lion or whatever, and they needed to be able to get out quickly and run away, the body created this response, and they were able to do that and protect their family and take care of them. When you face a physical threat, the body's response does make it a very efficient, like we talked about, it increases blood flow to the muscles and makes you mentally alert. The difference in today's world is that a lot of the stressful situations we face are not physical stress, threats to ourselves, and they don't have the same sort of resolution that our ancestors would have had. So a lion attacks, and there's a resolution to that. Either they kill the lion or they are killed by the lion, and then that situation is done. But when you are facing stress at work, or if you have a stressful situation happening with your family, that sort of ongoing stress doesn't have a definite end to it. And so sometimes the body has a hard time completing that stress cycle and then returning to the rest and digest, where we have homeostasis, and all of our body systems and organs are getting the blood flow that they need. Next slide, please. So what does the effect of that do to your body? We know our bodies like to be in homeostasis. They want to be in balance. And when you are in stress, the fight or flight response, your body is not in balance. While there is additional blood flow to the muscles and the brain, and your blood flow increases to those areas, there is a counterpart to that, in which though the functions of the immune system, the digestive system, and the reproductive systems slow down. And if you think about it from, our ancestors, this was a good thing. Like their body was in threat. They didn't need to be working on creating new life or digesting their food. Like there were top priorities that needed to be dealt with, and that was the physical threat that was coming towards them. But in our world, long term, this shift in normal body function and exposure to the stress hormones increases the risk of headaches and muscle tension, muscle pain, heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, digestive problems and sleep problems. And if you think about how the blood flow changes when you have that stress response going on in your body, that all makes a lot of sense, right? Like the blood flow is going to your muscles and those muscles are primed for action. So there's more muscle tension and there's more headaches and your heart is working harder because your blood flow has increased and your heart is pumping more times per minute, which is going to eventually lead to heart disease and that chronic high blood pressure and stuff like that. And then of course the blood flow is shunted away from your digestive system. So your digestive system isn't working like it normally would. You can see how those things come from just this shift of a really natural fight or flight response. But when the body doesn't get back to its homeostasis and being able to rest and digest, it really throws things out of balance. Next slide, please. So stress can be really healthy and it is a good response to short-term events, but the stress response in the body does help you function more efficiently and increase your mental capacity, but long-term stress also has a detrimental effect on those same body systems. So again, on your mental capacity, because over time, chronic stress decreases your ability to think clearly and manage even minor daily stresses. If you've ever had a stressful week, you can probably relate to that because by the end of the week, you just didn't feel like you could make any decisions about anything because your brain was just overwhelmed by all it was trying to accomplish. And that leads to an increase in depression and anxiety, and it also increases the risk of substance abuse. There's a study that was done in 2020 by Koltai and Stuckler that found that it is the perception of being stressed in our modern day, as well as the accumulation of stressful events that impacts the effect of stress on a person. But they also found that a person's perceived control over the situation helps mitigate those effects. So the more control and ability to change the situation that somebody has helps them to deal with whatever the thing is and not feel so mentally stressed by the situation. Next slide, please. So stress, oops, I'm on the wrong one. Stress is healthy and good, but some of the long-term studies on repetitive stress events show that they impact the physical and mental health of the population. But more than that, stress can also affect the DNA of a generation and the DNA of subsequent generations. So there was a study that was done on rats and how the mother rats interacted with their babies, and they were able, the DNA was changed of the baby rats dependent on the stress that the mother rat experienced while she was pregnant. But they also found those same DNA changes in subsequent generations of the rats, even if those rats did not have any kind of a stressful pregnancy or childhood or anything like that. But they also found that people are really adaptive. And so when babies were born, if they had a stressful life event, that some of that could be mitigated by an attentive mother who, for the rats, that was more like grooming and physical touch, and that was able to mitigate it. But they still showed signs of being less able to cope with stress than the rats whose mothers hadn't had a stressful pregnancy. There were also studies that were done after the COVID pandemic, and they examined the impact of stress on community. And while everybody in the community was affected, the impact of stress was definitely greater on minority populations, particularly for mental health outcomes among gender identity, sexual orientation, income, and academic status lines. Also in those studies, they found that a social support system can act as a buffer for the impact of stress. So having a community support system and team is important to help everybody, but particularly those who experience greater amounts of stress, deal with what we all experience in life.
Okay, so I know a lot of us are visual learners, so this video kind of summarizes what Rebecca went over and shows you exactly what's going on in the body and where. So this is a 4-minute video. I'm just gonna watch.
Cramming for a test, trying to get more done than you have time to do. Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed. But more than just an emotion, stress is a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. In the short term, stress can be advantageous, but when activated too often or too long, your primitive fight or flight stress response not only changes your brain, but also damages many of the other organs and cells throughout your body. Your adrenal gland releases the stress hormones cortisol, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. As these hormones travel through your bloodstream, they easily reach your blood vessels and heart. Adrenaline causes your heart to beat faster and raises your blood pressure, over time causing hypertension. Cortisol can also cause the endothelium, or inner lining of blood vessels, to not function normally. Scientists now know that this is an early step in triggering the process of atherosclerosis, or cholesterol plaque buildup in your arteries. Together, these changes increase your chances of a heart attack or stroke. When your brain senses stress, it activates your autonomic nervous system. Through this network of nerve connections, your big brain communicates stress to your enteric or intestinal nervous system. Besides causing butterflies in your stomach, this brain-gut connection can disturb the natural rhythmic contractions that move food through your gut, leading to irritable bowel syndrome, and can increase your gut sensitivity to acid, making you more likely to feel heartburn. Via the gut's nervous system, stress can also change the composition and function of your gut bacteria, which may affect your digestive and overall health. Speaking of digestion, does chronic stress affect your waistline? Well, yes. Cortisol can increase your appetite. It tells your body to replenish your energy stores with energy-dense foods and carbs, causing you to crave comfort foods. High levels of cortisol can also cause you to put on those extra calories as visceral or deep belly fat. This type of fat doesn't just make it harder to button your pants. It is an organ that actively releases hormones and immune system chemicals called cytokines that can increase your risk of developing chronic diseases, such as heart disease and insulin resistance. Meanwhile, stress hormones affect immune cells in a variety of ways. Initially, they help prepare to fight invaders and heal after injury, but chronic stress can dampen the function of some immune cells, make you more susceptible to infections, and slow the rate you heal. Want to live a long life? You may have to curb your chronic stress. That's because it has even been associated with shortened telomeres, the shoelace tip ends of chromosomes that measure a cell's age. Telomeres cap chromosomes to allow DNA to get copied every time a cell divides without damaging the cell's genetic code, and they shorten with each cell division. When telomeres become too short, a cell can no longer divide, and it dies. As if all that weren't enough, chronic stress has even more ways it can sabotage your health, including acne, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, headaches, muscle tension, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and irritability. So, what does all this mean for you? Your life will always be filled with stressful situations, but what matters to your brain and entire body is how you respond to that stress. If you can view those situations as challenges you can control and master, rather than as threats that are insurmountable, you will perform better in the short run and stay healthy in the long run.
Okay, now that we know what stress is and how it contributes to poorer health outcomes, I'm going to go into the disparities between stress and health. Research consistently shows minorities are at a greater risk for developing health conditions as a result of stress. Several factors appear to be contributing to this relationship. First and foremost, perceived and experienced discrimination increases baseline levels of stress. For example, increased rates of diabetes and high blood pressure amongst African Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Latinos has been attributed to chronic stress stemming from discrimination. Perceived discrimination has also been shown to increase symptoms of mental illness in Asian Americans and African Americans. Another factor that mediates between stress and health disparities is socioeconomic stress. A systematic review found that socioeconomic stress was a key contributor to health disparities in racial and ethnic minorities. Specifically, racial and ethnic minorities experience poorer health outcomes than white Americans within the same socioeconomic bracket. These disparities are also seen on a biological level, of the stress response beginning as early as childhood. Compared to white children with socioeconomic difficulties, minority children with socioeconomic difficulties release significantly more cortisol in response to stress. And they also show greater activity in the amygdala, which is the fear response circuit of the brain. Psychological stress creates dysfunction in how the body reacts to glucose and insulin sensitivity at significantly higher rates among African American adolescents compared to their white adolescent counterparts. Experts think this might partially explain why the rate of type 2 diabetes is significantly higher in African American adults. Finally, a study was done in white and African American adults to see how stress affects cortisol levels in real time. So participants provided saliva samples, and then they were exposed to a stressful task in the lab. And then they provided saliva samples again 15, 30, and 60 minutes after the stressor. So there were no differences between baseline cortisol levels between the two samples, but the post-stressor cortisol levels were significantly higher in the African American participants at all post-stressor time points. So 15, 30, and 60 minutes after the stressor. Another interesting thing is prior to the experiment, participants were asked about their perceptions about racial identity, and those who had significantly stronger attitudes towards their own racial identity also showed higher levels of cortisol post-stressor. So the researchers kind of deduced from this that perceptions of race play a mediating role between stress and cortisol. We've gone over a lot of different research, so I just wanted to touch on how stress is measured in research. In true experiments, stress is measured in a lab setting, like in our last study that we talked about. So emotional stress can be induced by making participants give a speech on the spot or lie to another researcher. And then physical stress can be induced through exercise or ice baths or things that make the body uncomfortable. The body's stress response is then measured through heart rate, sweat gland secretions, or cortisol levels in saliva or blood samples. But as we know, most research is cross-sectional and relies on self-report measures. And one of the most widely used measures of stress in research is the perceived stress scale. The scale has been around since the 80s, and it has great reliability and validity. It's an accurate measure, or it's an acute measure of stress, meaning it only measures stress over the past month. It's not a measure of chronic stress. Research has found that measures of chronic stress often lack reliability, as stress tends to fluctuate in our lives and our perception of stressors changes over time. So it's hard to measure chronic stress. I'm going to pass it off to Kendall soon so she can discuss ways to mitigate stress, but first you might be wondering what your stress levels are like in comparison to others in the research. So we're going to do the perceived stress scale together and see what our results are. So go ahead and get out your phone or a piece of paper. I'm going to ask you to jot down your scores. This scale has 10 questions. So the first 5 are on the screen. You're going to read each of the 10 questions and then rate them 0 to 4 using the scale at the bottom. So 0 is, I can't see it on my screen, 0 is never and 4 is very often. So go ahead and read through and jot down 0 to 4 on the first 5 questions, and then we'll add them up. So question 1, how often have you been upset because of something that happened unexpectedly? 0 to 4. In the past month, how often have you felt that you were unable to control the important things in your life? In the last month, how often have you felt nervous or stressed? In the past month, how often have you felt unsure in your ability to handle your personal problems? 5, how often have you felt that things were not going your way? All right, is everyone good to go to the next 5? All right, in the last month, how often have you found that you could not cope with all the things you had to do? In the past month, how often have you not been able to control irritations in your life? In the past month, how often have you felt that you were not on top of things? In the past month, how often have you been angered because of things that happened that were outside of your control? And lastly, how often have you felt difficulties were piling up so high that you could not overcome them? So you should have 10 numbers, 0 to 4. Go ahead and add those up. So if you scored 0, which is highly unlikely, 0 to 13, you have low acute stress. If you scored 14 to 26, you have moderate acute stress or normal levels of everyday stress. And then anything above 26 is considered high acute stress. Now, keep in mind, this is just stress over the past month. It's not a measure of chronic stress. But as we talked about, even acute stress can be very hazardous to our health. I don't know if anyone's brave enough to share, but was anyone surprised by their score, either how low or how high it was? Or did it hit kind of where you thought it would?
Mine was personally offensive. I did not think I was that stressed out. When I first took this test, when you put it up, I was like, Aaron, this is hurtful. So yeah, no, we'll get into the combating of stress. Hopefully your scores weren't that bad.
It's
I
interesting.
was actually pleasantly surprised, but I'm definitely on the high end of moderate, and I'm going to go with the chronic acute stress is probably killing me slowly.
Well, Laura, let's talk about some ways to combat some stress, okay? Let's talk about healing and combating and making it a little better for us. So, next slide, please. So we all have different ways that we manage stress, whether they work or not. I know that I have personally tried a lot of different methods. According to the Mayo Clinic, there are several ways to relieve stress. They had so many different ones. I tried to pick the top 3 that we could all kind of relate to, or at least try to incorporate in our daily life. Because we know stress is something that happens to everyone. Levels are unique to each individual, especially when we look at pre and post COVID stress, just like what Rebecca and Aaron were talking about. And there's a lot of ways that we can heal and also prevent stress, but healing and preventing stress is not a one size fits all. So finding something that works best for you is most important. So exercise, 30 minutes a day, a walk outside, especially with the sun coming out. I mean, it really makes a difference. Meditating or yoga could also help ease the distractions every single day. I know that, we all have tabs that are constantly open in our heads. So limiting screen time and focusing on breathing, you can incorporate that driving to work or on your lunch break or when your boss is yelling at you. You can kind of just breathe in and breathe out. Getting enough sleep was one of the number one reasons on this article that I read. It's the root issue for a lot of people, especially new parents. Not getting enough sleep can damage your brain's ability to make these solid decisions and can affect your relationships. I know that whenever I don't get enough sleep, I'm very cranky the next day. So it's definitely something to be mindful of. I think when we were kids, it was 8 hours of sleep, but adults don't need that much. But honestly, I feel like I need, all of the sleep. So next slide, please. So healing from stress, there are several different ways, and I tried to pick, like the other slide, the most, opportunistic ways that we can heal. So healthy eating, it's hard because a lot of people suffer from eating based stress or stress based eating. Your comfort foods, like we saw in the previous slides in the video, binge eating disorders are very common for those who suffer with anxiety. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. But healthy eating can be really easy to incorporate in your work, and being mindful to what we put into our body, because it's fuel. If you eat poorly, you're going to feel poorly. Therapy, it's not, that's something that everyone wants to do, and it's hard to talk about your feelings with somebody else. But it helps having a third person manage your life. I always said that, this person doesn't care the outcome. They're just trying to, they don't have an opinion. They're just trying to be there for you as best they can. And therapy is hard to start, but I think it is life-changing. And I know that a lot of men have a big issue with starting therapy, but you can see more and more male veterans are being encouraged to go through all of these conversations with therapists to get through their PTSD. And I think it's really important for everyone to give it a shot. Kristen, definitely caffeine is a really big, my husband did that for 3 months and he was much more pleasant to be around instead of being all jittery all the time. But laughing and physical contact, they always say laughter is the best medicine, especially done with friends, connecting with loved ones. I think Rebecca's slide had social clubs and community outreach programs. I was a part of a walking club in Nashville. There's sporting clubs, your religious organizations, social media groups too. I mean, in the age of all this technology, there's a group for everybody out there. There's, you know, the Harry Potter people, the paddleboard people, Girl Scouts. I mean, whatever you want to be a part of, there's a community for it, for everybody. Next slide, please, before I lose my voice, hopefully not. More ways to prevent stress. Much like the previous slide, the ways to heal stress are commonly the ways to prevent it, you know, eating healthy, therapy and habitual exercise. But let's talk about some more ways. So healthy work boundaries. I put this one on here more as to maybe a reminder for myself. But a lot of us have high stress jobs, and, you know, juggling your family and your work and grad school, you know, it's hard when to delegate and when to say no. But trusting your coworkers more. At my job, we have care days where some days we just need a mental health break and we can just take the day off. We don't have a lot of those, but, you know, they're nice to have in your back pocket for when you're really going through it. But also telling your boss or telling your other coworkers, you know, let's combat stress before it gets too much and starts causing all of these health issues, right? So healing from stress also is a way to prevent stress. So spending time in nature. I mean, most of us live in Tennessee. It's a beautiful place when the summer is here and the sun comes out. I mean, going to the lakes and going outside, you know, nature heals us. And it's a great way to just be healthier and be outside. And, you know, a lot of us are inside all day in cubicles and don't see a lot of sunshine. So just getting that 30 minutes, if not more, of a little bit of sunshine can really make a big difference. And then having a routine. This was a really big issue during COVID. A lot of people were disorganized and unkempt during COVID because we didn't know where to go for work. We were online, and, you know, I know a lot of our jobs are still online. So, you know, setting a schedule will really help organize your life and allow you to maintain control what little bit we have of this life to prevent stress from encroaching into your mental health space. So I hope that you guys were able to take a little bit of preventative stress and how to heal from it. So. I was
Does
like,
anyone have-
Doc, you're muted.
I'm muted, I'm frozen, I'm stressed. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the group? Or actually, if anyone wants to share, I'm gonna bring my son in here for 1 second. He was standing in his playpen throwing balls at the door. So maybe this will be a good stress reliever. Feel free to share any questions or comments. I'm gonna bring him in because he likes seeing
stressed
fun on the
out.
screen. 1 second.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions on how to heal or prevent stress, or have any suggestions, or, you know, any, you know, lifestyle recommendations, we'd love to share those if you guys feel comfortable sharing. I know it's an uncomfortable topic for some people.
I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And I mean, just from my background before I started this program, I mean, I did some work with ACEs and ACEs scores and things like that, but just reading everything. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so distracted by my husband.
I know.
Sorry, bad timing. He likes seeing
He's
his friends.
He's adorable.
So cute.
But it's just being reminded about what chronic stress can do to us physically. And I just think I liked all the suggestions everyone threw in there, because I think the lack of sleep, the effect of lack of sleep with that stress response is huge. And I've had people, in my life share that when they were going through a stressful time, like after the death of a family member and things like that, that when they they experience the lack of sleep. I mean, our family doctor has shared how it can lead to like psychotic symptoms and things like that. So I think that you all have inspired me to fully cut out caffeine if I can. So, which may also bring about mental health issues, but that's another story.
I mean, I remember when I first got my first sales job, I was drinking like 2 venti cold brews a day and driving 8 hours a day because I had 8 states in my territory and I wasn't sleeping. And I'm now almost 28 and I have high blood pressure because I'm so stressed out. So it's definitely like, this was a really great reminder to like do a self-reflection and be like, hey, it's not that serious. Let's take a breather. And, you know, I think with spring break coming up, Dr. W really, you know, had this in mind to just, you know, sometimes it's okay to take a break. We're not perfect. So.
I know I had
I always
something
think it
happen.
helps to know. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say that happened with me with high cholesterol when I was getting my PhD, and I had to take a step back and be like, okay, it's not too serious. And then this little guy likes to stand and not go to bed sometimes, but he's getting better at it, right?
Well, and it's so
Yeah.
important because a lot of the studies that I was reading was about parents and how, like, I'm not a parent, but I just got married and I'm like, I couldn't even imagine like the stress that parents have to go through, or new moms and parents. He agrees. So, you know, I couldn't, you know, all the respect and power for you guys. I mean, you're incredible. So for sure.
I think this was a good reminder. We talked when we were putting it together about how we all felt a little stressed about our stress presentation because it just reminded us how stressed we were. But like all of those, and then we joked about how like we're not going to do any of these stress relieving things. But it was really interesting to think about it in terms of like, you know, your body has this stress response, and then all of these things that help are the things that let your body know that it's safe again. So like you're not going to sleep for 8 or 10 hours if you're still in a threat. You're not going to, you know, sit to have time to meditate if there's still some major threat in your life. And that was really interesting to think about it in that perspective of like, oh, I'm actually just letting my body know that it's okay.
I know I'm talking a lot. Go ahead.
Sorry. I
No,
was
go
gonna
for
say for
it.
me, like the really hard one is healthy work boundaries. So I got a recent promotion. So I'm a nurse, I'm a Navy nurse, but I'm a division officer. So I have 31 people that work below me. And we have a lot of problems at our command. So I spend so much time. I was telling one of my corpsmen today, I was like, you know, we have so many fundamentally broken systems. So I constantly go back and forth between trying to be accommodating and make sure that you have everything that you need to do the things that you need to do, but then not being so accommodating that you're not being responsible for your actions and taking care of your own things. And she looked me like right in the face and goes, oh, well, you don't do a good job of that, man. Like you do way too much for us. Like we can do more. And it was just a good reality check to be like, oh yeah, maybe I am micromanaging a little bit. Like sit back
That's a
and like
good
listen
corpsman to be
yeah.
like, you know, they respect you and they're like, no, you are doing too much. So that's awesome.
So I was like, note taken. Okay.
Rebecca, you mentioned a study, and I talked about this too. I used to teach a undergraduate class about mental health, and the book was called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and it talked about studies. I don't know if any of you guys read that book before. And I pulled up an old PowerPoint slide from when I talked at Indiana State University, and it was talking about skeletal growth and stress dwarfism. And it was just talking about like there was a study done at 2 orphanages. I might have shared this with my policy class last semester, but you know, the kids who had kind of like the Mary Poppins like orphanage lady who was in charge of them, they were thriving, they were growing, they were happy. And then they had this like mean, nasty lady. And then the lady who was nice, she ended up having to quit for some reason, and the mean lady took over. And all the kids then just started like failing and like not growing and were sick, and you know it just wasn't going well. And then all the people who then got a new lady, they started thriving and growing weight, and it's just crazy just at that young age based off having, you know, a mean person or a nice person at your orphanage you know, be in charge of you, can dictate your health. Sorry, the name was Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's kind of a little more biology like, but there's a lot of really interesting like rat studies and stuff in it. It's an older book, so you could probably get it really cheap. The guy that you're actually watching the book on, the movie this week about, he's the guy who wrote the book. And I did want to talk about that video real quick, because I know people are like, this is so outdated, but it's so good. And this guy is just like one of the leading experts on talking about stress and how it impacts your body. So hopefully, even though it's old, maybe you've seen it 100 times or two, but hopefully you do find that enjoying. And thank you everyone for the comments about my son. he had to, blow his nose from. He's got a little cold. He is getting better. For those of you in my evaluation class last week, I was like literally stressed and having a mental breakdown because he was standing in his bed for like 90 minutes and refusing to go to bed. And I, not scaring any new parents in here, and I had to like go in his room at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I'm just like, why won't you sleep? And then grandma flew in town this weekend because she's a lifesaver. And all she did was say, okay, buddy, you lay down and you go to bed, and then we'll go to the park when you wake up. Went right to sleep, slept the whole night. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So have someone nearby to help if if you need a grandma in your life. This is really off topic. I have one more thing. If anyone has any more comments or questions about stress, please let it out now. But I don't remember which one of you were talking about diabetes and race. But it made me get on this this topic. Are any of you familiar with like Ozempic and what's going on with that, the diabetes, weight loss drugs? What do you all, I mean, I think this is an important topic to talk about in public health. There's a lot going on about it, right? Like we're learning, I just listened to like this 20-minute podcast, and I'm going to share it with you. And I'm not endorsing it. I'm not saying it's good or bad or anything. I just was listening to it on my run today because my brother keeps sending it to me, and he's like, have you listened to this yet? And it's talking about how the quote he said, let me find what my brother said. He said, Ozempic being used to manage obesity is similar to the opioid crisis being used to manage pain. And it's just interesting to me, if you listen, just from what I learned on this podcast, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a weight loss drug for people who are pre-diabetic or diabetic, which great, fantastic. It can be difficult to manage your weight, even if you aren't diabetic, right? And the problem is, and I was looking up this guy before class, he actually lives out here in Arizona. They were talking about the drug. I've heard a lot of people who need it as diabetic are starting to get priced out. Yes, that's a problem too. And a lot of people who really don't need it are getting, I think they described it like stomach paralysis or gut paralysis. And if you don't, like it says too, if you don't take it long term, you're going to have side effects, but people don't know it. They just think like, or they don't care, right? Like, I just want to lose this extra 20 pounds. But the point I was talking about, I need to look over this. They were talking about how I think the drug was created or in a lab in like Europe or something, and it's banned. Like they don't even use it there, but it's being used here in America, and people are making claims like, just with this being society and health, I thought this was interesting that like people are saying that, I don't know, there's so much out there. Someone feel free to stop me at any time if you want to talk about it. But like I think in the study, one of you mentioned something about like African Americans having higher stress levels are more prone to diabetes. And this is where it's getting a little tricky, because obviously we don't want to withhold a drug from anyone who could benefit from it. But people are claiming that this drug needs to be given to young adults, teenagers who are struggling with their weight, and not giving this to people who are people of color is just showing like white supremacy and stuff. But then it's like, no, like these teenagers really shouldn't be on this drug. And it's just, I don't know, I was trying to listen to all the stuff that's going on. I put the link in it. I can add it again because I know there's some comments, but that's something you should probably look into more. I know I don't know a lot about it, and I'm trying to, but as a public, being in the MPH program, that might be something to know more about. When I was prescribed it, my dosage went up. Yeah, Jessica, are you still on it? If you don't mind talking about it.
Oh no, I don't mind. I came off of it because it, like, this year for some reason I've been super sick. But whenever I don't normally get sick, and whenever he prescribed it, like when I first started taking it, it was fine. And then you have to go up in increments like every month or so. And whenever he bumped me up to the next dose, it was terrible. Like I felt so dizzy, and I was in bed for a week like straight. It was horrible.
Yeah, it's really scary. Go ahead, whoever.
I have so many thoughts. So first of all, like there's three main ones. There's Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. Wegovy and Mounjaro both seem to be better than Ozempic, but that's the one that's more readily available. So for people that like have PCOS or issues like that their weight gain is like something that is hormonal, I think that it's really great for. I see a lot of people that are taking it that are just trying to find a quick fix. Right. And it becomes an issue. I think it's going to be a huge thing in public health because of just access to care. And it's becoming just like designer medicine to where
Right.
if you have the money, you can get it. But then, potentially people that really do need it are going to be priced out because it's become the new popular thing.
Which
Right,
is,
and Christian.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
I was just,
Jessica.
I was just gonna say, like, because I got prescribed Wegovy, insurance wouldn't cover it. So then they prescribed me Ozempic, and insurance it wouldn't cover it either. It was gonna be like $1,100 a month. So then a gynecologist that's one of our patients came in and he was like, "Oh, we actually prescribe one that's compounded." He was like, "So you can get this from a compounding pharmacy, and it's only $250 a month." So it's like they're able to send it to compounding pharmacies. The dosage and stuff, I don't even know if it was really what it was supposed to be because it was off brand.
I work for a European pharmaceutical company, and it's not the same
Yeah,
thing that
that's
we're
what
getting now.
after I was like, that doesn't feel right.
No, we had our national sales meeting last week, which is why I was AWOL. But no, that's literally what we talked about all week is the industry, and it's targeting these designer medicines, and it's pricing a lot of people out, just like what Kirsten, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, I'm sorry, but Kirsten said. So no, I totally agree with everything that she said. You were seeing it every single day. So
Yes, the problem is with that medication is for high glucose levels. If you have high glucose levels, it's not supposed to affect you as much because it's usually for diabetic people. For example, my mom is diabetic and she started taking it. However, her being diabetic is actually she was having the same symptoms as Jessica was saying. So I guess it kind of really depends on the person. However, if somebody is taking it for weight loss, you're supposed to be with high glucose levels taking that. So yes.
Well, and I guess that's the thing is that so many medications and treatments for obesity are designed because there's the weighing the risk, the risk about whether you're taking this treatment that has a chance of improving something like diabetes or or something that is going to shorten your life and have a serious impact. And but that's not for the person who's 25 pounds overweight or just wants to reduce something. And like Christian and others said, then you're getting priced out, or so many people are using it that it's going to eventually impact whether it's on the market. And maybe they shouldn't be on the market, or certainly not to the degree that they are, but maybe they are useful for a small segment of the population for what it was designed for.
Thanks, Laura and Desiree. Yeah, because I didn't even think about that. Like those small, minority groups who don't have access to it or insurance to cover it, they're not getting it because of all these other people who are, just jumping on the wagon for that. I didn't even process that part. Katie, you had yourself unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I just thought it was really interesting that you had quoted what your brother had said in regards to it being compared to the pain clinics and things like that. So are we looking at, I don't know, 3, 5, 10 years down the road that people are going after doctors who prescribe this for those different individuals that might not necessarily have been diabetic, that it was more of a weight loss component? And it seems like this feels like it's very foreshadowing in a lot of different ways, because we've kind of been there and done that with pain clinics, and then you see that there's like new weight loss clinics and stuff like that. And somebody had mentioned Fen-Phen or phentermine and things like that. So that was a wave for a period of time as well. So it just seems like it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes.
Well, and I was the one who mentioned Fen-Phen because I remember that in the early to mid 90s. And the thing is that we're in a completely different mindset now, where the idea, and I agree with this, the idea of treating obesity as an illness, as a social determinant of health, all of those things, I think that's important. But when you turn around and market drugs to that segment of the population that may need them or at least believes they need them. And then you have people who maybe are going after the money to provide that, because when fen-phen was going around, there were reputable clinics and weight loss doctors who were really working it. And then there were those that were just making it very readily available for those that were 30 pounds overweight.
Yeah, and as public health people, I don't know, I barely listened to this. I was outside for like 20 minutes trying to get that sunlight and reduce my stress, right? But the one thing Katie mentioned about people going after like doctors and stuff, because I think like, I don't even know if this is true or not. This is just some guy talking about it. He said the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends this for teenagers and youth. And that's where like, I was just like, really, like, that's interesting to me. I have to look into that, listen to that again. And I think the other underlining problem is they said like 60% of adult Americans are pre-diabetic. And so like, just as like public health, and like, that's something that we really like, yes, all this is a problem, but like, this isn't a good statistic, right? And I hope it just like encourages you to, recognize the importance of why we're in public health and why we try to prevent people from getting to this situation anyways. So sorry to go off tangent. That was a really good presentation on stress. You guys, just by talking about it, it got in my head. So thank you for that. So perfect timing to have a stress lecture. Thank you for sending that in. I'll have to click this link too. So thank you for having a great stress lecture right before spring break. I hope you all can get some time to go outside or just take a couple days off your computer or catch up on some things. But yeah, send me anything you find on it. I find this really informational, exciting to look at, and I'll read it over spring break. But you're all free to go. I will see you all next time. Thank you for a great presentation, guys.
Thanks, Doc.